ISAC 545 students, welcome to your Introduction to IGBIRP Notes. It's important to note that your agency, program, or site might have certain requirements that have to be met for note-taking, just like they would have to be for a treatment plan. Right, so make sure to consult with your supervisor. Here we go. I is for introduction. We want to know what service are you providing, where's the service taking place, and who's participating in session. So the introduction might say, therapist provided individual counseling to client at client's school. It might also say, therapist provided family counseling to client and client's grandmother at the office. Your setting might also be that you're doing telehealth services. So you would make sure to note that in this section of your note. G is for goal. So whatever your goal from your treatment plan that you have made with you and your client is now going to go in the goal section of your note. You're just going to copy and paste it unless you have updated your treatment plan and changed your goal. So here's an example for you. It says client will reduce anger outbursts, hitting, kicking, biting, throwing cell phone on floor, throwing objects from 5 times per week to a goal of 0 times per week. Sustained for 3 months as evidenced by parent and caregiver report, self-report, and observation. B is for behavior. So I want to make sure that you note the behaviors that your client or their caregivers are reporting that have happened since their last therapy session. For example, this section might say, client's father reported that client has had 3 anger outbursts this past week. It might also note that the client stated that they are still having difficulty building and maintaining friendships with their peers at school. I also want to note in this section, how did the client behave in session? This is a great place to write your observations and how engaged they are in the therapy process. So I might note, client actively engaged throughout their therapy session. I might also note, therapist observed client expressing anger through play. You might discuss their affect that you observed in session as well. I is for intervention. This is my favorite section. I love coming up with creative interventions to include in this section. So it's whatever you did as the therapist to help your client reach their goals or address their concerns or issues that they brought into the therapy session. So you might say, therapist utilized an anger management strategy called Superman breathing, and you might just describe it in parentheses, slow, deep breathing, to help client manage their anger. You might note here, therapist modeled how to use this anger management strategy and practiced it with client in session. In this section, I might say, therapist utilized Kimochi, a social emotional learning tool to help client identify and express feelings appropriately. In this section, I might also note that I needed to do limit setting with my client. So I would note that and say, therapist utilized the ACT limit setting model in session with client when they attempted to throw sand in the eyes of therapist. Or I might say, therapist utilized the ACT limit setting model when client attempted to draw with markers on the wall of the therapy office. This section could also say, therapist utilized role-playing to help client practice and increase positive communication with peers and family members. One last note, if you're working for a county contracted agency, you may be required to include an intervention for every 15-minute increment of your session. So for a 45-minute session, you would have to include 3 interventions in this section. R is for response. So I want to know, how did the client respond to your intervention? Whatever that answer is, that's going to go in this section. It might say, client actively engaged in practicing anger management strategy with therapist and reported that they plan to use this next week anytime that they become angry. P is for plan. This is the last section of your note. This is when therapists are like, I just want to get done and get on to my next client or go home for the day or finish and wrap up everything that I'm doing. In this section, we're answering, what does the therapist plan to use or do the next session with client or family? So it might say, therapist plans to utilize bibliotherapy to help client reduce their anxious symptoms. This section can also be used for what does the therapist plan to do before the client's next therapy session. So it might say, therapist plans to attend a training on trichotillomania to help client with their symptoms and meeting their therapeutic goals before the client's next session. It also might be a great place to note that the therapist plans to consult with their supervisor regarding this client before the next session, and why. You did it! You made it through the Intro to IGBIRP Notes. Now, you might want to practice writing some notes using this format.